Welcome to another exciting episode of Growth Leaders by Shot, where we dive deep into the minds of the world's top leaders, uncovering the strategies, experiences, and insights that have shaped their incredible journeys. Today, we have the honor of welcoming a leader whose career trajectory is nothing short of inspiring. From his humble beginnings as a sales development rep to being a successful CEO. Meshach has navigated the complexities of the tech world with grace, determination, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. With over 2 decades of experience in the global tech industry, his leadership style, characterized by deep understanding of both the customer and the product, has earned him a reputation as a visionary leader who knows how to balance ambition with empathy. But Meshach's story isn't just about professional success. He's also an avid sportsman who believes in the power of healthy lifestyle, a dedicated family man who values work-life balance, and a thought leader whose insights have inspired millions across the globe. In today's episode, we'll explore his unique approach to leadership, the challenges of steering companies through growth, and the lessons he has learned along the way. We'll also get a glimpse into how he maintains his drive and energy in this demanding industry, all while keeping his feet firmly on the ground. So, without further ado, let's welcome to the show Meshach, a true growth leader. Meshach, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
The pleasure's all mine, Peter, and thank you very much for that illustrious introduction. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. And now, for the show, I do appoint you as the CEO of the online learning company. This learning company, and just for the sake of it, I happen to be the chairman of this online learning company, which is called Corporate Academies for Small and Medium-Sized Companies.
Okay.
This learning company, it has about 100,000 learner students per year. There's about 500,000 learning sessions run over a year. And there's really 2 parts of their offerings. They have one of the international global awarded soft skills catalogs within leadership, personal development, team development, sales development, customer service development, and compliance training with about 500 courses. But also along this, you're going to find one of the absolute latest in technology, what we call a learning management system, where you can easily put up individual journeys or team learning paths. They can get badges when they fulfill trainings, but also easily utilizing the latest AI technology for example, building product development training or partner training and so on. So the thing here now as a CEO, one of the main objectives of this is to explore the small and medium-sized company market. And a full solution, we call this a corporate academy, costs about €2,000 per month. So you can say 24K euro per month, and that includes the complete library for 250 persons and the technology and the services for setting up, getting on the run. So that's a little bit background. And behind you, you have a team working remotely all over the world, and you have a great marketing team. But your objective as the new CEO is, how do I get a full acceleration and rapid growth for the corporate academy market, wherever you choose in the market and in the world as such. And you have the size of the what it costs, etc. And now you are the new CEO. How would you approach this?
Great. So genuinely throwing me a curveball there, Peter, but I like it. I like to be kept on my toes. So the first thing is there's 2 parts to this. The first part is an overarching approach to go-to-market strategy, which I would call the macro element, and then there's the more micro details, which is around the specific information that you've provided, right? So what I'll do is I'll start off with the former, and then I'll delve into some of the information that you provided. So the first thing that I would do is I would form a foundation from an organizational standpoint, given that, and I'm assuming that we've got sales, we've got marketing, we've got customer success, we've got business development, we've got
Well, everything is remote here.
absolutely,
So
yeah,
that's an important because that's the world how it's building today. That's why we have looked for the mastermind in SaaS.
perfect. Okay. So assuming that I would do as a CEO is to ensure that everyone within the business is able to move in the right direction. That's ultimately my job, right? So that involves creating a clear vision that the business can adopt, providing a mission statement that the organization understands, and adhering to core values. I'm a big fan of accountability, integrity, respect. Those are ones that I think cover most areas of a business. And then once I'm able to communicate that information to the organization, then we move into areas of departmental and interdepartmental alignment. So when you mention some of those figures, for example, let's take sales for example, just because it's the most obvious one,
Mm.
and that was what I did for the first 9, 10 years of my career. I would look at how we are able to achieve what goals we want to achieve from a year-on-year growth standpoint or a rule of 40 standpoint. And then I would make sure that we were adhering to those numbers accordingly.
So So let's take this. I mean, I'll provide you additional information and situations over the journey here.
Mhm.
So the accountability, the platform is actually called the Training Accountability Platform.
Okay.
We will have a performance assurance system along with this in this corporate academy company. The target here is actually to choose one or all English speaking markets and actually to get it's very much new acquisition, but the size as a SME, so from 100 to 2,500 employees, the size companies. And we can set a number. So let's start with having 25 of those during the first year.
Sure. Okay. So then, so prior to actually going into the numbers, what I want to do as a framework, just as from an organizational standpoint, is to understand that each department is fully clear and fully aligned with their individual tasks, and also how they work together with other departments, right? So sales and marketing, sales and customer success, business development and marketing, business development, sales, and so on and so forth. Then we have things like KPI management and OKR management as well. And it's important to understand the differences between those two things. And then back to your point, which is looking at specific markets, the go-to market would depend on what the organization is looking to achieve. Now, in this instance, it's typically English-speaking countries. So what we would do is we create an environment whereby we have specific target locations, and then we would base those locations. If it's going to be specifically SME, so small to medium-sized businesses, then rather than separate reps by size, we would separate them by geography and by region, for example, assuming it's a uniform product, right? So that's how I
So,
would.
so and that's a great approach you're moving into directly there. Now, this happened to be a strong marketing organization, but the sales is not really that much in place. So that's one of your challenges. So how would you approach that?
So the first thing I would do is I would understand where the bottlenecks are in the sale. Is it that we're not getting enough qualified leads? Is it that we are people like our product, but they're not seeing the value potentially? Or is it the fact that we are getting to the final wire with 2 to 3 other competitors, but the competitors are just beating us? So the first thing I'd want to understand is where are the bottlenecks in the sales process? The second thing I'd like to understand is once we understand that, how do we actually overcome that? So if it's a qualification problem, then we train reps to be able to listen effectively and ask the right questions so that they can diagnose appropriately, whether or not they understand the problem or not. So I always say, let's say you go to a doctor, and let's say the doctor just knows that they've been doing this for years and they just know what the problem is. If they don't ask you questions, as a patient, you'd still feel a bit uneasy, right? So it's important
That's
for that
right.
doctor to ask the right questions and then base those questions on solutions where you actually feel the pain, no pun intended. That's part of the
Mm.
qualification process. And then we obviously have validation, which, will pertain to what would happen if you didn't do this, what's the actual economic cost, what is the value that you would find? Is it an increased revenue? Is it reduced expenditure? Is it more efficiency? Those are usually the three core metrics. And then I would look at the actual analytics and base it on data-driven decisions, right? So where's the highest conversion rates versus low? Who do we win against? Who do we lose against? Why do we lose? Other than price, yeah?
Mm.
How long do our sales take? If we're selling a solution for 24,000 euros a year, is 6 months too long? Probably. So let's say, the target is 20% year-on-year growth, and we want to
Mm.
achieve, and we're already doing 50 million, right? So that means next year we need another 10 million. What does 10 million look like? And then we divide it by our average order value, and then that number is the number of deals, and we would then ultimately multiply that by our conversion rate, which will give us the number of leads in the funnel that we would need. So that's kind of at a
So
high level,
what
we'll do that.
and so what is your experience when you go to the B2B? You are in the SaaS business, and you do need, of course, the SDR side, so the sales development during the initial qualifications, and moving on, but not having on-site reps, but actually running it as we do now on the cloud. What are, as by your experience, what are the positives of doing that? Of course, cost is one, but what are the negatives, and so on? And how would you consider that achieving these objectives and being, of course, highly cost conscious?
Yeah, I think, obviously the obvious one is the cost savings on travel, and the cost saving on time as well, because travel takes days. But ultimately, I think the benefit would be that kind of human interaction. If you are face to face with people in the same room, it does create a different energy, whether we like it or not. Um, we do tend to find that other people do tend to motivate others when they're in the same physical vicinity. But ultimately, we live in a world where a lot of people do work remotely. I work remotely most of my time for the past 12, 13 years, not just the last 4 years, like most people. So I'm very used to working in my house. Now, when that is the situation, that's when you would require strong LMS solutions that provide the capability to have the ability to look at the specific customizations that sales leaders, for example, need in order to facilitate their training modules, right? And have clear objectives that are associated with that. So, for example, sales rep A and sales rep is able to qualify more leads. And we are actually having specific checklists that need to be adhered to, then that means that that individual's doing a good job and can receive their badges. Whereas if salesperson B isn't doing that, maybe they're not asking the right questions and or in the right way. It's not just
What
about
type of what type of sales target would you put on the sales reps here?
if it's a 24K opportunity, I would say it would be relatively more volume. 24 is
This is
always,
for 250 employees. Of course, it's higher when it's 500 or 1,000, but
yeah,
as an
it's higher
average, yeah.
volume. So typically higher volume, it's more around velocity and it's more around qualification. But we still have an opportunity, we still have an obligation to provide value in what we're doing rather than just throwing in deals in the funnel for the sake of it, because that then bites you in the backside when it comes to GRR and NRR as well. But volume would be a key metric for me from an MQL and SQL standpoint. But like you
Yes.
said, assuming that marketing is doing their job effectively, then it's up to the sales function to ask the right questions and push deals through the funnel effectively as well.
So, what key metrics would you like to measure them on? And of course, also the marketing organization here. What are let's try let's say the top three measurements, something like that, and then try to explain why. Because this is really the core here on getting this running, I presume.
I think a lot of people like MQLs, SQLs, and
So
I would
that's
say,
a marketing qualified lead. It's a sales qualified lead we're talking about here for the listeners who's
yeah,
not working in the SaaS industry directly.
Sure,
Yes.
exactly that. And again, what determines that depends on the qualification criteria of the organization, right? For some organization, an MQO is simply they filled out a form and they passed 3 out of 4 gates or 3 out of 4 thresholds or criteria. For others, it's more around the market team actually, or business development, for example, may roll up to marketing in some companies, and then they will have to actually ask them questions over a phone call, right? It just depends on what you would do. But again, if it's this type of organization with this volume, I would probably adopt more of the former and make sure that the marketing team asks, 3 to 7 questions, and maybe it's at least 5, and then it goes through as an MQL, and then the sales qualifier will then have an initial qualification call, and then would ask more deep dive questions. And then maybe a third would be I would kind of cheat and say at least X conversion rate per gate. So I was at an organization once where our qualification rate was 10%, our validation rate was 25%, our negotiation rate was 75, and our commitment rate was about 95. So, I think
Mm.
those are quite good metrics to use. And if you take that as a baseline, if say you have 20 reps that are falling below that baseline, not average, but baseline, because if you take the average, then on average, half of your reps will fall below that, which isn't always that fair. But if you say 20% are below that baseline, what are they doing wrong? Then you can look at the LMS system and figure out from a training standpoint where you can train them and tweak that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's and is there any specific measurement? Because now I'm sitting in the board here, looking at this. What measurements would you like to provide to me as the board head of the board of?
Again, from a, you
I,
know,
I'm interested, of course, in what we call ARR here. Maybe
sure.
you can
So
explain
there's
that
two
also.
hats here.
But just
There's my CEO hat
yeah,
and then there's my CRO hat. I'll give you the CRO first. From a CRO
yeah,
standpoint, from a volume-based business, I would look at pipeline. How much pipeline do we have at any given moment? So if I know that I need 20% year-on-year growth, that number's, let's say it's 3 million, whatever that might be, and I know that we have a win rate of 5% of any qualified opportunity, then I can work backwards and figure out what my pipeline needs to be. And if it's ever below that, then I'm in trouble as a CRO. Conversely, if I'm a CEO, then I'm going to look more at ARR, and I'm probably going to I'll probably look at EBITDA slightly, but if I'm looking purely at growing the top line, I'm going to look at how my ARR grows from a sales standpoint and how that all funnels from every department from a commercial element, sales, partnerships, slash channel, customer success, and so forth.
okay. So that will give us that good insight. So I think this sounds like you're gonna do well on the corporate academy here. As a person, driving fast-growing companies, there's always turbulence in those, both in terms of maintaining the good guys and good girls and so on. So how do you balance your personal life with the efforts which you actually have to strive on with on a daily basis?
That's a great question. What I've actually found, I'm sure there's a word for it, but I don't know what the word is. But what I've found is the more responsibility one has, the more organized you tend to become. I remember when I was very young, I went to school and there was a guy that lived maybe 20 miles from our school, and he was always the first person in. He was always the earliest person. This guy was 20 miles away. Conversely, there was a guy who was literally lived next door to the school, and he was late every single day. And I think people tend to try and get away with much as they can, given how much responsibility they have. So ultimately, I think it's about attitude, and I think it's about outlook. So for me, the more responsibility I have, the more I find that I tend to make sure that I prioritize everything in the right way so that I'm able to give the right amount of attention to all of those things that I need, whether it's family, whether it's work, whether it's fitness, whether it's downtime, cooking or reading or whatever it might be. I have to make sure that I do that. I don't always achieve it just because it's never a perfect science. Sometimes you'll get that email at 10 p.m. and it's like, oh, this is do I go to bed now or do I answer this email? And you know, when you're in the position you're in, sometimes you just have to answer the email and you may be working for another hour. It is what it is, and this is what we sign up for. And I'm not against that. But I think on the whole, as long as you have some relative consistency, then you should be okay.
So what sports are you interested in?
Wow. So I played football in school. I played basketball. I did athletics. I did swimming. I really like football and basketball. I played basketball at university level as well. I'm 6'1" and I was one of the shortest people on the team. Go figure. And I play football every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. as well, which is pretty useful. But all the guys there are younger than me, so it gets harder and harder every year.
Yeah. And when it comes to your family, are they as active as you are? And because, you know, I speak a lot with women around the world and how they have managed to get a great career where the man is doing a lot at home, etc. How do you balance husband and wife situation?
Yeah, I mean, the mother of my child, she works full time as well. So you know, obviously living in London, it's always quite difficult to balance that. My daughter, she goes to the gym. I think she got the appetite for it. So she goes quite a lot of now. She's into fitness and nutrition now as well, which is awesome. So yeah, I think it's a really good balance, and you know, they understand the importance of that. So
Yeah, that's true. And I believe the key for all of this is to have actually a good communication, you know, what's needed from situation to situation.
absolutely.
I think it's exciting, you know, and I'm not saying you are fired, but it's over your CEO position right now on the Corporate
Damn it.
Academy. So I'm gonna put some rapid fire questions to you, Message. So,
Okay, I'll do
who
my.
has been the most influential leader in your life and why?
I can't give you my life. I think that's quite tough. So I've been watching someone
Absolutely.
called Rory Sutherland recently. He's a vice chair at Ogilvy Advertising. People should check him out. The reason why I really like him is because he's very, even though he talks for a long time, like you could watch him talk for like 90 minutes, he's quite funny, but he's very mechanical, which means that he will give you specific examples of things that will work for marketers, for example, as opposed to just fluff, which a lot of people at that level do. Um, so he's a leader that I really enjoy listening to recently because again, it gives you tangible ways of improving your business.
Great. And what's the first thing you do in the morning to set the tone for the day?
The first thing I'll do is I'll throw the cover off and I'll kind of kick my legs and then I'll just sit and I kind of just I literally spend not too long, maybe like 60 seconds, just kind of sitting there, just kind of appreciating, you know, just appreciating what I have in my life. I think that's really important. I don't know if you call it meditating, but kind of just appreciation. I'm not going to sit there and say that I
Mm.
sit there in a yoga pose. I don't. But I do kind of sit there for maybe like a minute, and it could always be better, but it could definitely always be worse. So
Yeah, and that's getting into the right mental state.
yeah, pretty much.
So, if you would recommend one book, sales or leadership book, which one would that be?
I'm a big fan of The Leadership Gap by Patrick Lencioni. The reason why I like it is because it gives non-traditional methods of leadership. Most leadership books talk about basically you could write it in 2 pages, be nice and motivate. But with this book, well, again, it's a bit more practical and offers some real life examples of how leadership, you know, scenarios of where things can go wrong when you're dealing with multiple personalities, which is invariably going to be the situation.
Mm.
If you've got a 300 million ARR business, that's a lot of people, and a lot of people can be chaos, right? So
Mm.
being able to have a leadership team, an ELT or an exec leadership team, which then follows your core values and your morals, and then that kind of dilutes to the rest of the organization. I think that's key. And that book talks about that.
Right. And how would you describe yourself in one word?
Can I use two?
Okay,
Cautiously optimistic.
great. We love that. If you could work from anywhere in the world for a month, where would it be?
Alaska.
Yeah, that's also cool in double sense.
There you go.
That's great, Message. I love talking to you, and good to have you as a CEO of the Corporate Academy and driving that growth. Thank you so much for today
Appreciate
and
it, Peter.
being on
Thank
the
you.
growth. Thanks. See you. Bye.